Hello, welcome to the Meeple Mentor YouTube channel. I'm Jared. With me as always is Holly. And today we are looking at our review of Aerodome Rising Horizons. And this is a two-player air combat game. This is I believe the latest version of the game. It says Season 1, but there's a lot of great content that you can expand into this game very easily. And one of the reasons I say that is the first half of the game essentially is deck construction. And you do this kind of together and simultaneously picking out cards to put into your flight deck, if you will. And then from there, you get to actually maneuver and try to use those cards to fly your plane to where you can get into position and thoroughly attack the opponent. You get 15 health points, and damage will get done and reduce that to 0. And it can be very fun and also frustrating at times because it's a one-on-one battle where you're tossing and turning and flipping and going back and forth. You got all these different maneuvers that you can do by use of the cards. And the cards are numbered with an initiative. And essentially part of it is you select your card at the same time, and then you reveal, and whoever's initiative, I believe is higher, goes first. So there are 4 main fighter archetypes that you'll be able to play as, and it's either the sharpshooters, the speedsters, the gearheads, or the daredevils. And based on what you choose is going to dictate what kinds of cards are allowed in the deck that you make. So they each focus on a different kind of flying, whether it's attacking or immediately moving around or speed, those sorts of things. But there's also a whole heap of kind of neutral cards that you can always add into your deck as well. But you're going to have essentially 1 through 9, and you get 1 copy, of each number. And then those numbered cards can come from the appropriate archetype decks. And so you're looking at those, trying to pick which one you want to put as your 9, as your 8, as your 7, etc. Also looking at the neutral ones, which are, they're good, but they're not as specialized. But I found that it was really important to have a good mix of both. One thing too, if deck construction and kind of planning out how your deck is going to work is intimidating, the game does come with some great deck, pre-built, constructed recommendations, and this card, this card, this card, this card. And so it's if you're playing as this fighter, plane, then go with this set of the cards. So it's really easy to get into, even if deck construction isn't your thing. But I think after a few plays, you might then go, okay, now that I see what these cards can do, I want to really customize it a little bit more. But I will say up front that it does come with all these pre-built recommendations, so you can kind of get to the table fast without having to know too much about what you're doing before you even get started. Your fighter planes in this game are hexagonal pieces that kind of look like this, with an arrow pointing which direction that they're flying at any given minute. And of course, the rules are very much open to, if you have miniatures that you want to use, you can use those in your game, as long as you kind of use the same hex piece size for the for what its area it takes on the map.
Right.
And in the game, or at least in the Season 1 box, it gives you basically a poster which you unfold, and it becomes your map. So this is the edges of the world as you know it for this particular game. You'll see, one plane starts on this side, one on the other, and then there's a few different areas here where auxiliary tokens get played out. And if you fly through it, then you get to collect, basically, or draw an auxiliary card from your auxiliary deck to better supplement your combat and flying. I think that's a pretty cool mechanism as well, to sort of, get some early upgrades or even late upgrades, depending on how the flying is going. Because sometimes you can tell who's on the offense and who's on the defense based on where they start flying around too. So this is kind of one of those, it reminded me a little bit of X-Wing Fighter, because there's like the measuring out of where you're going and like where it turns, and then there's like a range. There's this token of what counts as being within the field of battle. So if you do fire at something, you mark that up to your plane's hex and see if your target or your opponent is anywhere touching this or inside it. Then that would count. Additionally to that, your speed are dictated by certain lengths of cardboard. So you can place those out and see where exactly you move on the field. However, you don't get to plan that when you're choosing your card. You just kind of have to eye it until you actually do the maneuver. And part of this is, since this poster is the map, if you ever leave that accidentally, you do get penalized by however many points of your hex are outside the playing field. So it's a really well done, very streamlined, combat game that plays fairly quickly. More quickly if you just kind of take the pre-constructed decks and go for it. We found us playing a couple times in a row, since we already had everything set up and kind of done the way we wanted it to. What are some of your thoughts on how flying and combat work?
I enjoy the tricks that you do. You have on your card, you'll have down the side here, corresponds to these different tricks that you do, like the Immelman and flying straight or turning and excuse me. I really like the idea of moving the hex around with the cardboard measurements.
Mm-hmm.
It's just because generally you're like trying to figure out how many spaces, but you can't really do that here. And I enjoy the initiative because I know I normally don't like chance and guessing games and stuff, but this was fun.
Yeah. And it's just a two-player, situation, and it's pretty fast-paced. So as far as the random nature of like not knowing what your opponent's doing, that's part of it. And of course, trying to guess where you're going to end up in relation to them is really part of the whole game.
Another thing that was wild for me was trying to figure out which direction I was going to end up facing, because I have issues with directions and things.
Sure.
So that was hard to figure out.
Yeah.
But
do you think
it generally worked in my favor. Not really, because it's more of a processing thing than, learning how it works.
Yeah. So, did you feel like if someone has any kind of like physical dyslexia or things like that, like it's understanding like spatial relations, would they have issues
maybe
playing this game?
I think I got lucky several times.
So I will say she beat me. All right. So I tried my best. I could not get maneuvered to the point where I was able to consistently do some damage.
Well, the thing is, you had the better initiative half of the time. And so I was surprised when I would end up near you and then as a byproduct shoot you,
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe because of that, that mitigating factor, maybe because of that, it wouldn't be as bad on somebody with a lack of spatial awareness or a lack of understanding of distance.
And you were
direction.
You were bringing up the different actions shown here. Do you want to explain a little bit how each card kind of works in execution?
Not really.
No? Okay. So as you kind of choose your card and choose to resolve it, you've got different things that can trigger from top to bottom. And if it's got a lock, then you have to do it. And then certain numbers will either indicate speed, a number of dice for rolling for the attack, or even how many times you get to do it. And so that's kind of how the icons on the card work.
I've spent a fairly decent amount of time, including now, still confused on the lock versus the black background. So that's why I didn't really want to explain it. So.
Gotcha. But also, in addition to some of the moves allowed on the card, there's also usually like a special at the bottom, and those can potentially give your opponent some additional effects, like being dazed, and burned. And so there's counters that you would use dice for to see, like sometimes they'll go off in a certain number of turns.
Mm.
Sometimes they stay on until you get a special card that lets you refresh them off. Um, the Dazed, for example, is one that you put the die on it, and then basically it's going to stay out on the table for a certain number of turns before it goes back into your hand. As long as it's not dazed or it comes with some kind of penalty like that, you will get to play the card that you just played again into your hand. But there are other status effects that you can kind of give to other, your opponent, which I think is a great addition to a game like this because it adds a little bit of nuance and complexity to a game that's not too complicated to play or
Yeah.
understand. So I think it's just the right balance of like added mechanisms to make it fairly interesting. So I think it's an overall a really solid, fighting game where you're maneuvering just kind of in free space, um, given the constraints of the poster board, if you will. But it's not too complicated. It would be nice if they came with some miniatures to go with these instead of just the hex pieces. But I understand, like for the sake of the price, you want to keep everything just to kind of cardboard and cards. But if you fall in love with this game system, you could probably put in some of your favorite miniature, planes and have some fun, looking at them flying around on the table. Because I think the system here works really well. The deck that you get to build, how they work, the initiative system works really nicely. The effects that you can add into the game with some of those cards. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it's a great game. Personally, it's not the kind of game that I normally play. Just being upfront about that, it's not something that like I've played X-Wing before, but I enjoyed it for what it was. But it's not one that I like consistently want to go back and try to play again. So this is probably for me going to end up being a game that I don't get to play very often, just because it's not my style. It's more of like I tend to like more crunchy Euro games and things like that, where you're combo building on your turn. And this is more about like planning and then immediately seeing what happens and responding to your competitor alone. Um, I don't know. I can't explain it, but it's not really my kind of gameplay. Um, just because I lean more towards the Euros, I guess. What do you think?
I mean,
Where does it fall for you?
it was fun, but I'm not sure I would play it again
Okay.
because it doesn't. It was fun, but it doesn't necessarily appeal to me, I guess.
Okay. I mean, you're not like super into planes.
I'm not, and I don't necessarily like take that games where you're actually like battling against each other.
To win,
like,
you have to kill the other person's
yeah,
plane.
I'm not generally down with that. So
It's very combative.
yeah, I mean, it was fun,
Yeah.
but I'm not sure that.
Yeah. In the terms of like a combative game where like you're trying to go against the other player specifically, it's different. This one's a little bit more focused on that combat than for instance, like a racing game.
Yeah.
Like racing, you kind of do your own thing and you try to slip past other people, but it's essentially whoever can play the best wins. And in this, you have to like literally outplay the opponent specifically and undercut whatever they're trying to do. I'm sure there's a little bit more mind games in there because you're like, well, if they're gonna rotate left and attack here, I need to be behind them, or maybe I'll do the Emelman and like turn around and they won't see it coming, and all that kind of stuff. It's just a different dynamic and one that I'm not usually, all about.
See, and that's crazy because my main priority was staying within the boundaries of the board.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how my cards were coming up so wacky. So I was just like, okay, can I just stay on the board?
Yeah. But we did have fun. I enjoyed
it.
I would say if you like X-Wing type stuff and, maneuvering pieces on the table, so, where you measure things out and you try to aim, and plan out your moves with the cards, this does it really well. But we don't often play a lot of just like one-on-one kind of games, just like one against the other, very combat heavy or very take that. So for us, I think we'll probably pass after this review. But it is a good game for those who like this kind of game.
Yes.
So
there it is.
I think that's kind of where I'm going to leave it.
Yeah.
So thanks for watching this review of Aerodome Rising Horizons. Stick around on the channel to see more reviews by yours truly and Holly. And of course, our other video content like news and unboxings and tutorials and more stuff like that. So stick around, subscribe, and I'm also going to leave a link in the description for the book that I wrote, which is called Push Your Luck, the Board Game Dictionary. So if you want to learn more about the terminology and kind of jargon that people use talking about modern board games, go check out the book. It's available on Amazon or in paperback, also via Amazon. But yeah, you got it Kindle or printed booklet. Anyway, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. My name's Jared.
I'm Holly.
We'll see you later.